Over the last year and a half, there's been a lot of debate around changes to the Tenancy Act and what that means for landlords and tenants. Recently, the government legislated changes to the Tenancy Act, and they're being implemented on the 23rd of March this year, 2020. This video is designed to show you those changes, what it means for your investment property, and how we at Rain & Horne will be working with you to ensure that you're both legal and safe in your investment. There has always been a generic statement around an investment property to be fit for habitation, but the changes in the legislation have made that more specific. In fact, they've given us 7 points that define fit for habitation. And so they are structurally sound property, adequate natural or artificial light in each room except storage rooms or garages, adequate ventilation. The property needs to be supplied with electricity or gas and has adequate electricity or gas outlets for lighting, heating, and appliances. There needs to be adequate plumbing and drainage. Number 6, they're connected to a water supply or service or infrastructure for the supply of both hot and cold water for both drinking and washing and cleaning. And the last one, that it contains a bathroom facilities, which includes toilet, washing facilities, and also allows for user privacy. The benefit of these 7 points is that it's now very clear on what fit for habitation means. Of course, these are not exclusive, and these requirements give us a guide on what fit for habitation now means. There are new changes coming in from the 23rd of March, which will ensure the properties remain safe from a smoke alarm point of view. Those changes are: we must carry out annual checks to ensure all smoke alarms are installed at the property are in working order. We need to replace and remove any batteries in smoke alarms during the period specified for the smoke alarm manufacturer, which is usually annually. We need to repair or replace a smoke alarm that's not working within 2 days of becoming aware that it's not working. And lastly, we need to replace a smoke alarm with a new smoke alarm at least every 10 years or based on the manufacturer's requirements. Obviously, the easiest way to fulfill all of these smoke alarm obligations is to use the professional organisation that we've partnered with through this process for a fixed fee annually. They will check, monitor and repair the alarms. This is a tax-deductible fee, and you get a certificate of compliance, which is both putting your mind at ease on your investment properties, but making sure that your property is legislatively compliant. Under the existing legislation, a tenant has always been able to make minor repairs or modifications with the landlord's consent. These minor alterations have now been identified in the legislation and clearly enunciated so that the landlord can't withhold consent for the following modifications: securing furniture to a wall or premise other than a tiled wall if it's necessary for the safe use of that furniture; fitting a child-proof latch to an exterior gate of a single dwelling; inserting fly screens on windows; installing or replacing an internal window covering, installing cleats or guides to secure blinds or curtain cords; installing child safety gates inside the premise; installing window safety devices for all child safety devices; installing handheld shower heads or lever-style taps for the purpose of assisting elderly or disabled people; installing or replacing hooks, nails or screws for hanging pictures, paintings, frames or any other similar item; installing a carriage service for connecting a phone line or accessing internet or any other facility, customer equipment associated with the provision of this service; planting vegetables, flowers, herbs or shrubs if the existing vegetation and plants don't need to be removed and the shrubs will not grow to more than 2 meters in height; installing on the residential premises to which the residential tenancy agreement relates a wireless, removable outdoor security camera; applying shatterproof resistant film to windows or glass doors; and making modification that does not penetrate a surface or permanently modify the surface, fixture or any structure in the premise. At the end of the tenancy, the tenant is still obligated to return the property to the same condition that it was in at the start of the tenancy, assuming fit wear and tear. And if they don't, the landlord can still apply to tribunal for those works to be completed. Under the new legislation, there are now mandatory fees that can be charged to a tenant when they break the fixed period of time of their lease. And those fees are calculated on the basis of how much time in that fixed period of lease has already expired. This situation is the same under the old legislation, but the fees have been dramatically reduced. The break lease fees are 4 weeks rent if less than 25% of the lease has expired, 3 weeks rent if 25% or more but less than 50% of the lease has expired, 2 weeks rent if 50% or more of the lease but less than 75% of the lease has expired, and only 1 week's rent if 75% or more of the total lease period has now expired. Now, the significant risk here is if you're in a 12-month fixed term lease, the last 3 months mean the tenant can break the lease, giving only 1 week's break lease fee. Now, I suspect that this might change the decision for a landlord to renew the tenancy agreement for the current tenant, but I would also urge you to have a look at your landlord insurance policy to make sure that if you're not on a fixed term lease for your investment property, that you are still covered under that landlord insurance policy. Under the new legislation, the disclosure requirements from a landlord to a tenant have increased, and a landlord can't conceal or unreasonably withhold information before the tenancy agreement is signed. Some of those material facts are now defined in the new legislation as any flooding from a natural weather event or bushfire within the last 5 years, significant health or safety risks in the property, if the property is listed on the loose fill asbestos register, any serious crime that may have occurred in the property in the last 5 years, used for or manufactured cultivating prohibited drugs in the last 2 years, that council services may or may not be available to a property, that shared driveway or walkway is accessible by others not on the tenancy agreement, that the strata body that the property exists in may have scheduled rectification works on the register, that there's a fire safety order for external combustible cladding. And of course, before signing the tenancy agreement, the landlord must disclose to the tenant if they have any intention to sell the property or if a contract for sale has already been prepared. That's the same as it was in the old legislation, but all of those new requirements mean that there's a more meaningful disclosure about the property and the risks entering into the property of the tenant before the tenancy agreement is signed. There's also an obligation for us to provide your tenant with the current copy of the bylaws for any strata complex that they're renting in. If any of these disclosures are not made prior to them signing the tenancy agreement, it is an option for the tenant to give only 14 days notice at any point through the fixed term period and end their lease. Under the new legislation, for you to be able to pass on water usage charges, it's necessary for the property to have water safety measures in place, for it to be separately metered, and for the charges that you pass to your tenant to not exceed those that are paid by the landlord. Interestingly, from March 2025, to be able to pass through the water usage charges, all toilets in rental properties will also need to be dual flush, WELS 3-star rating. Under the current legislation, it's been possible to pass on utility usage charges to the tenant if we were able to separately meter the usage, which means if we had a separate meter for the usage, we were able to take a single supplier invoice and apportion it through a number of occupants, shared dwellings and dual tenancies. Under the new legislation, it's only possible to charge usage of utilities to a tenant if a separate invoice comes from the supplier of that gas, electricity or water. So from March 2020, to charge the utility usages to your tenant, it will be necessary for us to receive directly from the supplier an invoice for the usage of each of the tenancies in a property. Under the new legislation, it's possible now to terminate giving 14 days notice for non-payment of rent and non-payment of utility charges. This is a real win for landlords because up until now it's been very hard to enforce the payment of utility charges. There are a number of other changes in the new legislation, which also include new templates for the tenancy agreements and forms that we as your agent need to use, restrictions around photos and videos for the inspections that we're going to be conducting in your property, a limitation on the number and the size of the rent increase that we can apply on your property every 12-month period of time, and clarification and ease around the tenant looking to get repair orders from the tribunal. So what does this mean for you? What do you need to do differently? Well, nothing really. Because you've already empowered Rain and Horn to look after your investment property, our trained professionals have moved our processes and procedures to both protect you and your property through this changing legislation period. Of course, if you know anybody else who's self-managing at this time and they would prefer to have a professional team look after their property, we can help them as well. Please put them in touch with me. With this video, I'm also going to send out the changes in print to the legislation so that you'll have them on file should you need to refer to them again. It's understandable that these changes are stressful and we're here to help you through those. So if you need clarity on any of the changes or what it means for your investment property, please call me directly or any of our professional team. We are here to help you.